Kia ora, everybody. Hello, my name is David Hall. I'm a roving editor for Bridget Williams' books, the BWB text series. It's described as short books on big subjects from great New Zealand writers. The little book that could. We've covered many, many big subjects, including the housing crisis, state of journalism, young authors' perspectives on contemporary politics, science policy, but there's really fewer big subjects than the subject that Rod Oram has tackled with his new BWB text entitled Three Cities Seeking Hope in the Anthropocene, which is about how to design cities and where cities can go in the context of climate change and environmental pressure. So I'm just going to start with a couple of thanks and acknowledgements before I turn over to the panel. First, I'd like to say thank you from Bridget Williams' text to Policy Observatory, specifically Ian Shirley and Julian Molyneux. They're partners in this event tonight. And also thank you to AUT for their support, especially the providing this venue and the refreshments that I've sadly had to pull you all away from. And in particular, I'd also like to thank the Vice-Chancellor, Derek McCormick, who was supposed to be here, but has been unexpectedly called away. And he was going to come and say a few words, but I'm going to ask Ian Shirley instead just to come and make a brief announcement.
Thank you very much, David. Tēnā koutou katoa. E nā mana, e nā reo, e nā iwi o te tangata whenua. Nau mai, haere mai, haere mai. Haere mai ki konei te wharewananga o Aranui o Tamaki Makaurau. Maria mai nā mātei kia tangi ai tātou katoa. Haere e nā mātei, haere, haere, haere. Aha koa hei toratoro, a kounei kupu ka nui tei mihi, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. A very warm welcome on behalf of the Policy Observatory and Auckland University of Technology. I too am sorry that Derek is not here tonight. I'm the off-course substitute. And I was keen for him to be here tonight, first of all because he has been a driving force behind the Policy Observatory, and also the second reason and part of our celebration tonight is that Derek has just worked through the appointment of Rod Oram as an adjunct professor of the university. So there are a number of reasons to celebrate this tonight. To celebrate, first of all, Rod's book, to celebrate his appointment as an adjunct professor of the university, and to celebrate our focus on the city tonight. So you're all very welcome. I hope you have an enjoyable evening. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou, good evening. And I just want to thank you, Ian and Derek and AUT for according me this privilege. I have, in an earlier life at a different institution, been an adjunct professor. Nobody knows quite what it means. My colleagues then tended to introduce me as a drunk professor or a junked professor, and I promised to be neither at AUT. But the opportunity to work with you at the Policy Observatory, because the Policy Observatory is making a very substantial contribution to national discourse, but also the chance to work with journalism students. I've always enjoyed working with young journalists, and so that's going to be a great pleasure and privilege, and also the business school and elsewhere. So thank you. And one last thing, it feels very appropriate to be doing this in this building because Sir Paul Reeves was a huge inspiration and great friend. And so Paul's here tonight. Thank you.
So before I let Rod introduce the panel, I'm just going to turn to Rod and ask him a couple of questions just to introduce to some of the ideas to the book. And I wanted to ask Rod, you've been a journalist for many years and you've written a lot of columns in a shorter form, and now you've made this transition to the book. And I wanted you to reflect maybe on what did writing a book allow you to do that writing your columns for, whether it's Sunday Star Times or Financial Times earlier, what that has allowed you to do? What space has it given you?
Essentially, I'm not doing anything different than I used to be able to do as a journalist. So when I started at the Sunday Star Times in 2001, my column was 1,250 words long. Today, given the exigencies of media, it's now 700 words. So essentially, this book is actually about 3 cities, 4 stories in each city, so that's 12, and each piece is only about 1,500 words long. So in a sense, it's a bit like columns I used to be able to write, but the best part of all, it brings them together. And it gave me a chance during the month of interviews I did overseas. In fact, by curious coincidence, I left this night for Beijing a year ago. But to do those 45 interviews in total in those 3 cities was an intensity that I've never ever had as a chance to do as a journalist before. But in terms of actual form, it's essentially me just writing 12 columns.
And I also want to pick out one of the words from the title, Seeking Hope in the Anthropocene, hope, because this is one of the problems with addressing these issues is it's very easy to get weighed down by the drama and the glumness of where science seems to be pointing out where the world is going. And so I'm wondering, Rod, how you sustain hope and how you strike a balance between that and despair.
Well, most days I don't, to be honest, which was one of the reasons for the trip. I felt that economies were not performing the way we thought they were supposed to, nor society or politics or the environment. So that was one of the reasons for taking the trip. But in essence, the answer is a very simple one, and at one level it's completely trite, which is that if you stop hoping or you stop trying to do something, it really is all over. So that's kind of why you have to just keep slugging. But the second one is the people that I've tried to capture in this book, in terms of the thought and their work, they are an extraordinary community of people because actually a lot of them know each other. And they are the absolute embodiment of the sort of community that I think is incredibly important. And again, I'm drawing on the book here, which is that the issues we're dealing with today are truly global. They are extraordinarily interdependent. And yet the solutions to them have to be completely local, because that's where stuff happens. So in order to make that work, we have to have communities that have a common sense, a common understanding about what needs to be done. They have a common purpose around how they're going to do it. And they have real commonwealth about how that's shared. The economic benefit, the social benefit, the environmental one, the cultural one. And then you have communities where everybody's involved and therefore can contribute to the solutions. And we then have courage and conviction to move a lot faster, but the compassion to bring everybody along as well. And so many of the people I interviewed in the book represent that sort of community locally, but in an incredibly globally connected way. And so that, for me, is actually the essential hope.
Excuse me, I wonder if we can get rid of that horrible hum we have and improve the sound quality.
We do have somebody at the back who's now jiggling lots of levers and things, dials.
Let's hope for the best.
Okay.
But we've got such a great series of minds and practitioners here at the table, so at this time I'm going to step back and let Rod introduce the panelists, all of whom he's got personal relationships to, so I think that's best. So I'll leave it over to you, Rod.
Well, thank you. When I say I've got lots of favourite people, I have quite a few, but here are 3. No, I won't. Anyway, sorry, I'm digging a big hole here. On my immediate left is Rachel Brown, founder of the Sustainable Business Network and its chief executive. And Rachel is extraordinary in terms of how she brings people together in a community. to do great things. And so it's very appropriate that Rachel's here, because what she's doing with business absolutely is central to everything in the book. Next to Rachel is Penny Hulse, who you all know very well as Deputy Mayor of Auckland. And of course, we all know Penny has done the extraordinary job of leading council through the extraordinarily difficult and challenging work of the Unitary Plan. And the Unitary Plan's terribly important because it gives us something of a roadmap about how on earth we develop Auckland to be the sort of city that any city in the world has to be if it's going to play its role in dealing with these solutions. And then next to Penny is Sudhvir Singh. Now, you'll have seen on the announcements and the slides, the speaker was going to be Nico Elson from Generation Zero. Nico sent us an email today saying, Sudhvir's in town, can he stand in for me? And which was very kind of Nico. Now, I should explain about Sudhvir. He is a doctor. He also has a PhD. In fact, I know his PhD advisors in the room. Sudhvir was one of the founders and leaders of Generation Zero. And if you're not familiar with them, the zero means the first generation of zero carbon. So these are people who understand the issues. They research them very intensively. They offer incredibly effective solutions, such as the congestion-free transport network in Auckland, such as their great contribution to the Unitary Plan, but also they are able to exercise these issues with the public in ways far more creative than many of the rest of us can do. Now, Sudhvir is back visiting for a while because he's now in Oslo as the Director of Policy for a foundation called EAT. This is extraordinary organisations like the Stockholm Resilience Institute and the Wellcome Trust out of the UK, which is trying to work out how to fundamentally rework the whole food system in the world to make sure we have proper nutrition available to everybody in environmentally compatible ways. So that's the small job that Sudhvir is doing.
We need to talk about that.
So we'll hear a little bit about that later. So these are three people who are deeply into all this. So we're going to try and focus our discussion on Auckland, but if I may, as a starting point, just make one bridge between the book and Auckland, and it's this. If I was to pick one thing from each city, it would be this. So the first point about Beijing was that I heard there for the first time a phrase I'd never heard before, and it's environmental civilization. And this is something the Communist Party started talking about 6 or 8 years ago, and it's now turned up in the current 5-year plan, just started this year. This is about China reaching deeply back into its culture and history to try to work out how it can re-establish a much more fundamentally sound relationship with the ecosystem. That sounds crazy in a country of 1.2 billion people, that is the world's largest producer of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, but that's the challenge. So the question for me is, how do we reach back into our various cultures in New Zealand to take us back to that bedrock on which we can build quite literally a new civilization? London is about extraordinary research and policy and financial mechanisms and technology and all the rest, which are some contributors to this, to these solutions. So the question for us is, what is our great strength that is like London's, but our great strength in New Zealand that we can do terrific innovation and application here and contribute to the world? Chicago is arguably, of all the North American cities, the most advanced in terms of the transition from old city to a new sustainable city. Los Angeles, Toronto, New York, they'd all claim it. But Chicago is interesting because on one hand it works very hard about making its existing built environment a lot more sustainable. Terrific work around energy efficiency of buildings, etc. But on the other hand, it's also working very hard at building up clean technology, which is why one of the reasons Lanzatech moved from Parnell to Chicago. and why I write about that in the book. So those are three themes from those three cities, and I hope we're going to explore what that means in Auckland terms, with each of our panellists just giving their own take on that, or anything else you want to say by way of an opening comment. So, for openers, Rachel.
Right, I get to go before the Deputy Mayor. I feel very honoured. Penny.
First of all, I thought I'd share my own personal story, and it's neat because there's a few people in the room that I do know and I've met over the years, so it's nice to see you all. And Rod, thank you very much. I loved your book. I really enjoyed it. I read it while I was actually sitting in the Philippines and being horrified by a whole lot of things that were grim that were going on in the Philippines, to be honest. And so the book felt like I had Rod kind of in my ear reminding me about the things that we do. So it was lovely. But anyway, my history is actually my second big job was working at Waitakere City, the Eco City, many years ago. And Penny was then a young councillor with a lot of passion trying to stop landfill being extended, I think, Penny. And really passionate. But we were really lucky in those days because there was a whole belief in eco-cities, which is kind of, imagine that into the Auckland context, because that was Waitakere eco-city, Auckland eco-city, we could do it. And we believed we could, right back then. That was, 2000 probably, or before, late 90s we were doing that. So a lot of the stories that we started to develop in the eco-city days are still the stories I'm working on now, really. But I've been through a number of iterations. I had a go at working in the corporates and I bloody hated it, to be completely honest. I found the councils, no disrespect Penny and to anyone else in the room, just too slow. And while I was doing that, I got to meet the business sector and I get to play with these guys. But what I noticed particularly about the small business sector, is they were bright-eyed, bushy-tailed doers, and they really wanted to solve a lot of the issues that I thought we needed to solve. So that's why I started to set up the whole sustainability space with the business sector, was this belief that if we could pull this people, connect them together, they'd realise they're not on their own little personal mission, and actually there's a massive movement going on. So that's kind of what I've been doing for all these years. And then in about 3 years ago, I realised suddenly, actually, we're not being clear enough with our communication, and we need to really signal what's New Zealand's strength, Auckland's strengths, New Zealand's strength. What are the areas that we need to signal to business that New Zealand can really lead on and grow our economy on? Because I think there's a real disconnect between sustainability and the economy. A lot of people think sustainability equals cost, it equals it's going back to the 50s, it's a different way of thinking. Well, it's just wrong. Sustainability is about impact, it's about innovation, it's about growth, it's about all those things, but about doing it in a very, very different way. So what we realised, and actually Rod was on our board at this time, was that there were kind of 4 key strengths that New Zealand had that we could leverage and we could build and we could work from. The first one was renewables. We could be 100% renewably powered in our energy. Our biggest challenge at that point was really about transport. Our transport system is really out of date, so we need to work out how to do that in a really different way, and I'll let you pick up on some of that. The other one is community. When I grew up, we had a relatively egalitarian community. The difference between the haves and the have-not wasn't so extreme. I've watched that accelerate away. I've watched salaries accelerate away, and for the community in New Zealand to go, that's okay, when I think it's just totally not okay. So that was an issue for me, but it was also, what's the role of business in using all its strengths to build community in New Zealand? So things like paying decent wages, things like using its procurement to only affect companies that are actually going to solve social and environmental things, and also to use its investment, which we've just heard a lot about, by banks, which are just appalling. And banks could do that stuff a lot better. So there's a whole lot of stuff in the community space that I think business needs to get its head around and start to really change. The other one was around efficiency of resource use. As the population grows, we need to think about how we use all the precious resources that are on this planet in a way that doesn't mean we take them, create a thing, and then throw it in a landfill. We have to change that so it's circular, so that we don't do that. Everything should be designed to be either recaptured in our society or put into a safe holding pen if it's really toxic, because at the moment we're doing that appallingly. And finally is the cost of restoration. And Anne, I know you know this very well. We have been really hard on our physical environment. We're hard on it in the way we grow our food, but we're also hard on it in the way that system affects things like waterways. So we work in those spaces too. How do we morph the food system so it doesn't in fact erode the capacity of our natural environment to grow that food, but also to feed us healthy food so we don't destroy our own health? So those are kind of all the things that we've been signalling to business. But then we've been going, okay, businesses, you've got to solve this because government, believe it or not, is not going to lead this. So you're going to have to solve it. So things like the work that Penny's doing is really critical in setting a framework for New Zealand business to start to respond to that. So that's kind of the broadest area of work that we do. So we signal around innovation because innovation is needed. We still need to have new ways of doing it. Massive collaboration across sectors, but also across business. And also that whole idea of, for the big corporates, if you guys can work out what you need to do it at scale and do it at speed, and don't do it so bloody slowly, and stop thinking that people don't care, because they do care. And if you keep doing it wrong, eventually it's going to hit you in the face. So that's kind of the story that we're telling our membership and trying to get them on. And I've got loads, like how many years of awards? 13 years of awards of stories of businesses doing the right thing. So my other thing is, can you please start thinking about where you spend your money and make sure you spend your money in places with businesses who are doing something good, because that is one of the biggest drivers they will ever listen to. So that's my last pitch.
Thank you very much, Rachel. A treasure trove to unpack in due course. And Penny.
What she said, really. Kia ora katoa. I've sat here and had time now to process exactly what an extraordinary room this is, and I've also managed down my level of stress being amongst people who are just extraordinary. It's a huge privilege to be here. And Rod, a huge fan. You know, what an extraordinary little book. I love this kind of thing, but I'm a dipper in and out, and I proudly hold my book up. And this isn't kind of inky swatch show off politician, you know, whack a little thing on every page just because I'm pretending. They are for real. This, I think, is it just tells that story of what we need to be really worried about, but also where there's hope. So I want to just talk a bit about hope for Auckland. And I lay my feeling of hope fairly and squarely at the feet of SUDS and the Gen Zero team and the people who helped us midwife the unitary plan. Mm-hmm. And I think what extraordinary change has happened over the last 6 months in Auckland. We need to capture that. A real kind of disruption has happened in Auckland. People have gone from being meetings like this where I've sat and been shouted at and almost thought, you know, why didn't I bring my stab vest? And the lovely Chris Dempsey knows what I'm talking about from Waitemata. You know, I barely feel that I've got out of places alive because I've dared to suggest that we need to look at our city differently. Suddenly that's changed. And this is that kind of disruption, that mood change that we need to grab and we need to colonise it, and we don't need to let it slide back. We need to bank the change that seems to be there in Auckland. And, you know, Rod, reading this, I can kind of see some of the things we need to build on that. You make it really clear in here around the creaking financial systems that are changing. So we just need to work out, things are fundamentally broken. We cannot keep doing the same. We've changed, the status quo has shifted, and, you know, my world, which has been the unitary plan for the last 5 years, has helped that along. The potential within that, I think, is huge. We have set quite clearly a different chart for Auckland now, and we now need to bed that in. And you've got a beautiful quote in the book here, that Mumford quote, which I can't quite remember. I think I wrote it down, but I won't be able to find it now. But it talks about how cities shape our thinking, or we shape our cities, and then our cities and the urban form of them kind of shapes us. So for me, that's the next thing. How do we take the hard and slightly dry and boring part that we've created through the unitary plan and now make that visible change in the city, so that we change the DNA and how we interact with and how we think about our city. And the practical things, the really little things that we talk about what we need to do more of. The tangible rewards for behaving sustainably. The free parking for electric cars, all the stuff you talk about, Rod. Safe, viable, vibrant, exciting pedestrian places that just make it easy from go to A and B. Let's not get too anal about what they're going to be. Let's just make them. Cycleways. And we did a quick check. She walked, he came with an electric car, I biked, Sods came by public transport. These things happen from wherever we are in Auckland. Let's make it easy and reward people for these things. Let's retree our city. And, urban forests are a visible thing that make people feel good, and suddenly they start to change our urban form, but they also remind us of our daily stewardship of the environment. So the thing, my kind of collecting idea at the moment is to make our care and stewardship of the environment. This is not greenwash, and it's not just doing things that appear to be easy and quick to do, but it's changing the way we think and interact with our city. I'm sure we'll get a chance to say a couple of other things, but above all else, Auckland has signed up as a C40 city. I think at the moment we haven't got the foggiest idea what we're going to do to make that happen. We've got all the bare bones of how we can colonise that remarkable space that we've been given. Now, don't tell anybody, we'll keep that within this room. What we've done quietly, and Rachel will know and she'll recognise it, we've simply taken the Waitakere Eco-City footprint and we've transformed that. We've called it the Unitary Plan and we've called it the Auckland Plan. It is pretty much stuff that has been done on a very small scale that we know will work. We've got some extraordinary stuff that's happening around the city. We just need to amplify the good. And above all else, we need to acknowledge that the status quo simply isn't working, and we don't need to be frightened into retreating back into that. You talk in the book, Rod, about the new political systems that operate, and it's the changing paradigm of the right which appear to be suddenly realising that there's a whole toolbox to operate out of. I think the left need to learn the same, and we actually need to combine our toolboxes and operate in a way that focuses on our city, Auckland. It focuses on the environment and who we are. I'm sorry if I'm offending people on the left and the right, I really don't care. And we need to work out what's best for a just, fair and moral city. And I really like that statement in the book, Rod, that money seems to have replaced those words like justice and fairness. If the environment works and if we're sustainable, the obvious third leg of the stool is to take social justice and fairness with us. So I'm unbelievably hopeful. I've got my little instructions on what to do and an extraordinary bunch of people in whom I owe a huge debt, not the least of which, and I will keep saying this until my dying day, Gen Zero, who helped midwife the most difficult process that Auckland's gone through out there into the open, and they showed us how to do it well and reminded us that everything we do is actually for future generations. It's not about us.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Penny. Lots to pick up on there. Can I just ask one thing? Al, would you mind closing the door there? I'd hate anybody here to think there's a... Thank you. Well, no, I just hate to think anybody to think there's a better party somewhere else.
Yeah, you're locked in.
Quite a
Lock the
noise
door.
going on. Thank you very much. Thanks, Al. I should point out that Al's deeply into carbon zero electricity and with his company Ecotricity and other promoting electric
EVs.
vehicles and all the rest. Sudhvir, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for your tremendous contribution here, Rod. It's really exciting to be here because I now come from two slightly different perspectives. I come from a person who's grown up in Auckland and over the last few years had the privilege of working with other passionate Aucklanders to really put forward some ideas for our city, which, thanks to Penny's leadership and others, are now being implemented, which is really exciting. But also over the past few months, I've had the chance to work overseas and learn from other cities around the world. And that gives you quite a fresh perspective on the opportunities Auckland has, because we've got all the ingredients here in our city to really set some pretty exciting trajectories. And with our actual administrative model now, we've actually done a lot of the hard part of bedding in a transition. adjusting our rates, putting in place a unitary plan, doing those things that the media in particular find quite uncomfortable. And now we have this empowered organization, the Super City, which can really be ambitious in some of the long-term challenges facing our city. And it's really great to hear Penny speak about the environment like she just did. So that's really exciting. Rod's mentioned 3 cities, Beijing, London, and Chicago, and what we can learn from them. I think Auckland will be seen as the city that turned itself around, because what we're going through right now is a really exciting transition. We've got a beautiful natural environment. Unfortunately, the built environment is currently in a situation we all like to improve, and we're working on our way through that. And I think we can do that at great pace and be acknowledged for that. In terms of citing examples from those specific cities, Beijing's leaning a lot on its history. Well, in Auckland, our history is that we had the highest public transport per capita in the world as recently as the 1950s. Our inner suburbs, of which we're so proud of and of which it's so expensive to live in now, were actually designed around the public transport system of its time, the tram network. So that is in our DNA, and that is something that we can look back to as we go to the future as well. In regards to London and its sort of sampling innovation from all around the world, we're one of the most diverse cities in the world. We're also a young city. We don't have to lean on super ancient traditions, and therefore we can learn and be quite nimble in what we implement, and we can use some of the best talent and the best expertise from around the world to do that. So that's really exciting. And from a young person's point of view, despite the horrific situation with housing that we face, what we have seen is that when we do put forward solutions, they can be constructively taken up. We've seen an 8-fold increase in cycle spending, an 8-fold increase in cycle spending in the long-term plan. And as a result of that, already we've seen 40,000 more cyclists in the past year in Auckland. And that's fantastic, and that's exactly confronting some of the issues that Rod's laid out in his book in terms of reducing emissions, giving people more active lifestyles, making a more livable city. We've seen public transport booming, rail patronages going up 20% per year. We've doubled the number of people using trains in just 6 years. And now, despite a huge amount of central government reluctance, we're managing to build the city rail link. And coming from an outside perspective, seeing the construction works is just so fantastic. So that's very impressive. And the unitary plan, despite me and Penny being booed at several occasions, as recently as February, somehow has been passed. And that allows 400,000 new houses, the majority of which will be within the current urban area, the majority of which could therefore be more affordable, more efficient, and more sustainable as well. That's a huge opportunity for Auckland. So there's a number of reasons to be optimistic. And from a young person's perspective, it just shows that if you engage with your city, you can see a lot of positive change. One challenge I do have for Rod and some of the thinkers in this room is that I think an aspect that's been not given as much attention as it could is the health aspect of the challenges we face. We're one of the most obese cities in the world, unfortunately, and that's posing a huge toll on our health system, and I've seen that firsthand. And actually, that's a direct result in some ways of how our city's organised. And Rod, you refer to the donut model in this book, and one aspect that the donut misses, despite symbolically being associated with it, is human health. And I think that's a challenge that all of us can now take up. And there's many exciting examples of how municipal policies that benefit our environment are also offer the co-benefits to human health, such as cycling. So I'd love to see that perspective brought in more in these discussions. But finally, I'm now currently spending a lot of time in Scandinavia, and it's fantastic seeing some of their ambitions. The city I live in now, Oslo, 1 in 4 new cars is electric. It's the highest rate in the world, and that's a direct result of leadership from political figures. The city has a plan to ban cars in the inner city by 2019 and to be zero carbon. And so there are examples out there, and Penny cited the C40 network, which now we're an exciting member of. And so we can actually learn, and that's the advantage of thinking about these massive global challenges at a city level, because cities are in a great position to share ideas, exchange knowledge, and implement in quite a nimble way, where central government and the UN system is a little bit slower. So there's a lot of reasons to be excited despite these deep challenges that Rod's laid out. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed. I would hasten to point out that if you haven't read the book, the donut economy is incredibly healthy. It's a very unfortunate
It's a
title
terrible name.
that Kate Rayworth gave it, the model, but you'll need to read the book
That's
to
a good
understand
one.
that. Look, we could have a great chat amongst ourselves, but this is kind of like a chat amongst all of us. So in the time we've got left, I would just love to hear what's on your minds, and in terms of comments or questions for us up here. David's got a microphone. So we are recording this for the purposes of AUT, so if you could just flag David down for the microphone so we capture the question too, please do. So, Claire, right there, thanks.
Just a little teaser, really. I don't worry about TY Point closing down. I'd like to see the government giving us assistance to get electric cars, and it's not going to be any problem using up that electricity.
Yes, and the greatest policy thing that the government won't do are fee baits, where you charge an escalating fee for the more carbon dioxide a car produces, or nitrous oxide, and which incentivize people to have cleaner cars. And then the money you collect from that, you offer as a rebate to people with zero emissions cars. Fee baits work wonderfully in Norway and a number of other European countries, but the chances of that being implemented here currently are sadly zero, but we know exactly how to do that. Oh, can I just say one other thing about electric cars? Please, 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 no electric cars in the bus lanes. People don't need that inducement to have an electric car, and they'd screw up the bus system. Sorry, I'm shut up.
But that's only for Auckland, really, isn't it? It's only an issue for Auckland. And I don't think Auckland would consider
Well, electric cars have to be part of the mix of solutions we put forward, because it's incredibly challenging to be zero carbon, but they are still essentially doing the wrong thing, which is a single occupant vehicle taking up a lot of space in our city and not actually allowing a person to burn any calories. It's doing the wrong thing slightly better. So I think still the overwhelming incentives should go on public transport and cycling.
Actually, I want to support you with that. And I got rid of my car, so I don't own a car anymore, and I don't have an electric car, much to Steve West's frustration, I'm sure. But I did that partly, I thought, shit, that's a bit risky, because I do have 2 children, and they're 12 and 14. But I knew that if I didn't do it, I'd never force myself. The amount of times where I would leave my house and go, oh, I just can't be bothered walking, you know? And I just won't do it. I'm going to jump in my car. It's so much easier. I don't have that choice. I've stripped myself of that choice. So we all have bikes, and we all have comfortable shoes. And the great social thing that's come out of that, I spend so much more time with my kids, because I have to make them come with me. So we walk to the supermarket with our refillable bags, and we've got a few of those now, and we walk to the supermarket and we chat, because when you walk, you chat. Teenagers don't chat that well. You know, if you're just at home, they don't chat. They're normally plugged into something. So this has been a phenomenal success, and I highly recommend it. Bit risky, I know. I can see you're going, shit, I'm not doing that. But it's a good idea, and I really, give it a go. And if it fails, get a car.
Actually, I'm going to give a little plug. I can't resist. I've been electric e-biking for a year from Te Atatū Peninsula into town, and I'm now completely addicted. And I think we cannot underestimate the life change of deciding to do that. And I realised how much of a life change it was when I had to take my car in at one of the days during the week. I think I was picking up some stuff from John Ringer over there. Wonderful, sustainable, gorgeous, paradigm, marvellous man. But I said to someone at work, oh, for God's sake, what a hideous morning. I caught the traffic in. And I realised that that's what my brain is doing now. I either go by bike or I come by traffic. And I think it's that little subtle change within the way we think about how we interact with our city. The intimate nature of walking and biking and how you feel about your city is transformative. I know you're a sustainable, gorgeous bunch of people. You're already doing that. But we need to remind people about what a beautiful place it is when you can actually hear, smell, see, and talk to the people that you're interacting with. And that touches, my other little passion, which is those incidental bumping up against people you don't know. You actually have to be around your fellow Aucklanders when you're, huffing and puffing, walking, biking, public transporting, whatever.
Lenny.
Yeah. Hi, obviously Lenny. One of the things that really frustrates me is when you start talking about sustainability and reducing carbon footprint, and you talk about cost. Now, I'm a partner in a venture capital firm, and whenever I hear you talk about cost, I think somebody's got to get paid. Now, if somebody's got to get paid, if I have a choice of who to invest in, if I can invest in a dying technology for a sunset technology in an industry that's going downhill, or an up and coming technology where somebody's got to get paid, can I please invest in these technologies that, if it's going to cost money, I want to be investing in the people that are going to get paid. So how do we change the focus on this cost to innovative new industries, the kind of exciting new industries that I want to invest in, that I want to buy from, that I want to be part of? It's just, how do we change that paradigm?
Actually, we did some research on investment, and we surveyed, what was it, 1,500 people? Do you remember, Rod? It was a few people, and admittedly, we surveyed our pretty much friends and friends of friends, right? So it would have been slightly skewed, but all the information was saying exactly what you've just said. I want to get behind the companies that are doing the stuff of the future. All my investment options, basically, I have no idea where the investment goes. Well, actually, we do know now where some of that investment goes. So there is this desire for some solution in New Zealand for lots of people to be able to invest in those future solutions. And there isn't a great option unless you're linked up with an investment company that gets what you're talking about. Hey, somebody who's doing that research and going, well, here's the future of biofuels, or here's the future of electric vehicles, or here's the future of design, whatever it is. That opportunity is actually quite hard to find. And unless you're extraordinarily wealthy and well-connected, I don't even know how to connect it to anything. I don't know if you know.
It is very difficult. Remarkably, there's a handful of people in Auckland Council as eco-building advisors who do a wonderfully one-on-one custom process there. We need to expand that sort of thing. Through the Sustainable Business Network, you can find more about these companies.
But investing in them.
But investing in them is incredibly difficult. I think the starting point is to actually get a change of awareness so people understand a little bit more about the relationship between their consumption and the ecosystem. So then they start to want to do things differently. It's sometimes the investment in that as a personal level can be these days still be rather on the expensive side, but the benefits are enormous. So I'm sorry to talk about our own situation with our house, but we've turned a 74-year-old house into a net zero energy house that used to consume 15,000 kilowatt hours of electricity and gas a year, and now runs on only 4,500 and is a far warmer, brighter, nicer house. We're running one electric car and one plug-in hybrid off that. So our total fuel bill this year will probably be about $1,400 for house and cars. At current prices, it would have been $8,000 for the house and our old V6s. So it's just about, as a business journalist, I'm just really, really interested in trying to get some of these concepts across. I'm sorry, I dived down to a very particular thing. But fundamentally, and this is actually what the Anthropocene's about, is we've got to understand what our relationship is with the ecosystem. Otherwise, we won't do anything, and it'll be too late.
So, Rod, as part of that discussion, I've been raising with Council for the next 3 years, now that we've done some of the big challenging work, the next big challenge is the big grown-up conversation about Auckland, about what you pay for and why, and how do you expect us to manage this into the future? Because if we're very honest and blunt, a cheapest low-cost Auckland is not going to be a sustainable Auckland. And I'm sorry to say this, but some of the dribble that's going on with some of our political aspirants about holding your rates down and reducing cost is actually trashing the environment and the city you live in. but we're not having the challenge and pushback from the community because everyone quietly wants someone else to pay. And I have yet to see a whole bunch of people, it may happen tonight, say I'd be happy paying an extra $50 a year. So, you know, I think that for me is the challenging discussion that we need to have. I've always said to people, don't ask me to tell you or, you know, promise to keep rates down because I won't. We will steward money wisely, but we need to invest in the future of Auckland, and I would love to see that discussion driven really, really well.
The central concept there is about total cost of ownership. So it's not about how much money you spend to build an asset or to buy an asset. It's how much you then spend to run it. And we know from really, really great organisations like the Global Commission on Economy and Environment that a low-carbon city today, with current technology, has a lower total cost of ownership and running than the old way. And so you, in council, already build into budgets not just the capital cost but the running cost as well. But we need to help people understand that concept much better, because if we make better decisions around that, actually we'll be making better decisions environmentally as well, because the two are intimately linked.
And for Sudavia and his children have a city that they can actually afford to live in.
And, Rod, if you build in the health equation, which is really tough because often councils don't budget for the health side, but if you could actually share some of those total costs right across agencies, imagine the real cost of doing things like cycling. If you could really, everyone truly account for that stuff. It changes the equation completely.
So, Lenny, that doesn't entirely answer your question, but I hope we're offering a few glimmers as to where that discussion might go.
I just wanted to ask you for some thoughts about waterways in cities, because what we see is we have these gorgeous harbours in Auckland, for example, and as we've learnt from Havelock North recently, you know, urban communities and water are tied in really integral ways. And thinking about places like Copenhagen, you know, where they bring canals right into the city, where you've got the cycle lanes being used to channel water into wetlands, where the water's being cleansed by, you know, plants. We've got native reeds that can do that job. And yet in Auckland, we're still putting so many of our waterways, we're still putting waterways. The pipe guys are still taking waterways and sticking them underground as a routine kind of way of dealing with the flow of water on the land. So do you have thoughts about that? Because urban forests are fabulous. Looking after the Gulf is absolutely fundamental. Looking after transport, but water is the lifeblood of the land and of the people.
So I'm going to jump straight in there. I admire watercare for all sorts of reasons, but they're basically 19th century engineers that want to reticulate everything. The idea that we're pumping storm water all the way across the city to process at Mangere is bonkers, basically. Now, I know there are a few people in council who would love to be able to grab hold of watercare as a CCO and try to reorient them a little around this. But anyway, that's my bit. Penny, that's a task for you.
I totally agree. You know, Damien, the issue of putting water, even ephemeral streams, under, into pipes is just an anathema. It is bonkers. It's expensive, and the end result is long-term. We're loading long-term costs onto our city. The unitary plan does enshrine some reasonably good, more resilient, focused water management. You know, the 1 in 100-year floods now are happening 1 in 10 years, so your pipes are inadequate anyway. But the impact of stormwater on our harbour is cataclysmic. All of our environmental indicators are heading down, and that's down in a bad way. We're getting worse. So, you know, the management of water is utterly critical, and the Havelock North Havelock North example is such a good one. You know, I'm making this up, but my guess is $20,000 worth of fencing may well have stopped, you know, cows pooing in the whatever leads into the aquifer. You know, I mean, it's that kind of thing. So, sorry, it's waters. I'm passionate about water. The challenge we've got is, number one, is a governance challenge. Watercare is a CCO. If we could bring it back in-house, we could be far more direct. Number two, we have got some good stuff in the unitary plan. But number three, it's more expensive in large inverted commas, in the first instance, to build more sustainably. but in the long term it is going to save us a fortune. So, you know, I think that using water as an example of the big conversation that we need to have with Aucklanders is critical. Sorry, I could go on about water and I won't, but utterly critical. Sorry,
I'll leave after you.
Sure, yeah. Thanks for the question, Damon. And I was in Indonesia last week, and there was a news announcement. There's a raised terror alert, and so some of my colleagues were like, "Oh, thank God you live in New Zealand. You don't have any terrorism there." And I said, "Okay, but let's look at what's headlines in New Zealand." And it said 1/3 of the population of Havelock North have been poisoned by our water supply, and how has it come to this? And even though the cause and effect is still being worked out there, it's pretty clear what some of the influential factors were. And if you don't look at Havelock North, you look at Canterbury and what's happened there. And Rod, some of the concepts you deal with as an economist are quite complicated, but in terms of explaining at quite a simple level how you pollute something that then poisons people is a bad outcome, and an externality that's captured in that. I think water is a great example, and I think there's much great work happening at a city level, but we need to have a much more profound national conversation regarding what the hell are we doing when our goal is to be able to wade through some of our rivers. And so it's looking quite shocking from an outside perspective. And if our tourism industry, where we put so much weight currently economically, is completely disentangled with how we're treating water, it doesn't bode well for us in the future.
Yeah, no, that's a good call. Don't let Coca-Cola take over our water. We're working on a project called Million Metres Streams, and that has a mission of getting 1 million metres of streams restored, which sounds like a lot. You know, to me that feels like a lot, but it's about 0.2% of our waterways, so it isn't a lot. But the cost of doing that is about anywhere between 25 and 36 million on about 2% of our waterways. What we don't seem to get is the cost of restoration and doing it once we've done it wrong is really high. So we've just got to stop doing it. We've got to learn from our mistakes of the past and stop repeating the same dumb things over and over and over again. And I'm really passionate about water. And one of the things that we've done with the Million Metre Streams is try and form partnerships with all the regional councils to help scale and speed up the effort they're already on. So all the councils are doing their bit to try and do something about water, and they have a small, tiny budget. Most of them have lost any of the government funding to actually record what's going on in New Zealand's waterways anyway. So there's a lack of information, a lack of data, thanks to the government, which is a real shame. So the councils are doing this on the smell of an oily rag with a community that's asking them to reduce their rates. So we're trying to crowdsource using an online platform for people to donate to their bloody waterways. I mean, this is where we've ended up having to be with trying to solve those really important issues. Anne's been trying for years to get some decent funding into waterways in New Zealand. Really hard, Anne? But we all care about it. We all say we care about it. So we've just got to start saying, no, it's not okay anymore, and we're going to change it. And I think we've just been getting a little bit too passive, to be honest.
I agree.
And I think we had a fantastic presentation at our conference yesterday, which was all about purpose, two actually, because there was another speaker, Philip Mills, at the end, who actually got me all riled. But Nikki Hare was talking about behaviour change, and she was basically saying, you know, the last woman who was killed went kicking and screaming to the gallows. I can't remember her name, unfortunately, but it was the last time we killed people in that way, women in that situation, because she went, fuck it, I am not going to go to the gallows in a nice way. I'm not going to be respectful. I'm going to be angry about it. And when I listened to that, I thought, you're absolutely right. We've got to get, angry about these things and start saying, no, it's not okay anymore. We're not going to accept it, and support people like Penny. And that's why we're doing the waterways stuff, because we're angry about it. It's not being funded enough. National government's not doing it. Local government's trying to, but they're not resourced enough, and we're stopping them. We are stopping them. So we've just got to start to go, no, we're going to change that.
Hello,
Let's just do that.
my name's Dita DeBoni, and Rod Oram was my first real editor, and he was very inspirational. So thank you, Rod, for continuing your work. And I've written a column about Dr. Singh, who I think should be the next mayor of Auckland, or at least mayor of Auckland down the track.
After Penny.
No, I don't have no interest. It'd be fantastic.
My question just leads into the last issue that you raised, and that is, although I sound like a broken record, we have a very useless government, and certainly in terms of these issues, in terms of environmental issues. So all this great work that's happening, all these smart people getting together, it's all great, but in New Zealand we have an economy that's very reliant on government intervention and help. And if we have a government that maybe doesn't believe in climate change, or doesn't know anything about climate change, or is, etc. What realistic improvement can we make if that is the case?
Look, I can't resist jumping straight in. At one level, this is actually an extraordinarily interesting and easy thing to do, because we can't expect governments to lead anymore, because it's all incredibly poll-driven. So all we need to do is get pretty viral with people, so to speak. So if we get sufficient change and just get people plain excited about this stuff, I mean, this is really interesting to do and great fun. Then politicians will follow. And they, because whilst, as I was talking earlier about local action, of course you need national frameworks and international frameworks to make it work. But if enough people get excited about this, we can get the politicians that we need.
And there is an election coming.
Oh, we won't be able to do that quickly.
Just a couple of quick things on that, and I completely agree with Rod that if you get people mobilised and angry, you can see change. We've seen that at a city level, in the positive. Yes, this government does respond to polls, and so we've seen that with class sizes, we've seen that with the city rail link. So if we can show it out there that there is outrage, perhaps we've seen that with housing at the moment as well, that they will move. Second of all, internationally, Rod's talked about the Anthropocene and some of the major challenges. We've got this framework now called the Sustainable Development Goals, and that's actually recognising in many ways that central governments as an entity can't be relied on to confront the challenges we're facing. So all of us, whether you're a business person, a municipal leader, an NGO, need to step up. And so I think there is room for all of us to be making progress on these issues. And third of all, we need to reflect on our heritage again. And New Zealand's had such a proud voice on international issues. In fact, that's the reason why I was fortunate to be born in this country. My parents are from South Africa. They were very upset at what was going on with apartheid, seeking a place to bring up their children. They heard about the protests against the Springbok Tours in 1981, and they decided to immigrate here. And we need to find ourselves again in terms of our passion on global issues and bringing that to the streets and getting the word out there.
I'm taking my cue from David, time-wise. What do you reckon?
We've got one more time. One more question.
Yeah. Hi.
He aha te mea nui o te ao, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. I mean, I don't live in Auckland. I'm brought up in Auckland. I live in Sydney, but I've been over and I stayed to hear this. The answer is about people and not getting people angry, actually, because Brexit, I've just been in Europe and Norway, Brexit and Trump are about anger. And we need excitement and vision. And what I've heard the panel talk about is people-centred things. And while you have a conversation that's only about money is the only thing that matters, and you don't put up alternative currencies, I just do a little plug, Rod, for my Changemaker Currencies framework, but you value attention, values energy and time against money, you have a challenging framework that people's brains and experiences can relate to, and you stop the control of the discussion being totally about dollars. And so from my perspective, for changing how people, for activating the scale you need, I think you have to seize control, like George Lakoff talks about with neurocognition, neurolinguistics. You have to reframe it. Because while it's all framed about dollars, I don't think we've got a chance of scaling up, mobilising the masses that we need. But I think the conversation can be changed to excitement, possibility. People want possibility. And so I'd really counsel against anger, because neuroscientists will tell you it leads to schism and fear and resistance.
concerns something that the Royal Commission mentioned in its report. And it said one of the ways in which you'll be able to judge the success of the Auckland Council is how well they work with central government. And one of the problems that Dita referred to and others have referred to is that we actually have a major problem. We have two major deficits in the region, one with the physical infrastructure and one with the social infrastructure. And we haven't talked about the social infrastructure really at all tonight. But there are some population groups that have been incredibly disadvantaged with what's happened over the past 3 to 4 decades. How are we going to do something about that? Because I think that while, you know, I certainly like the focus on hope and so on, it seems to me that those populations, they're not here tonight, for example, and they're the ones that have really carried the can for the last 4 decades.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, gosh, where do you start with that? Yes, the gap between those who have and those who have very little and those who have absolutely nothing is opening up, let alone the haves and the have-not. And I was very sobered the other day to talk to someone in Te Aratu Peninsula who lives in his car, and he was talking to me not about the fact that he lived in his car, but he was looking around for a safe driveway, and I thought, this is a conversation, who would have that conversation in Auckland, and is this the new normal? And it kind of is, So somewhere we need to look at the extension of the work. And this may sound incredibly arrogant, and I apologise if it does, I don't know another way of putting this, but the government kind of matters a lot, and in some ways it doesn't matter as much as we think it does. And I believe utterly in the fact that cities are the place to make the critical difference. So we've picked up the gaps. We've got the Southern Initiative, which got off to a rocky start and is now starting to deliver some very good work. And I've just come from a briefing on that. We're looking at a West Initiative. It's council and the resources the council brings, wrapping its arms back around the community, and then advocating quite hard for the filling of those gaps as needed. Would it be easy with a different government? Of course it would. There wouldn't be quite the same arguments. But I think we need to move beyond the kind of vaguely victimy place that we've been in, which is, can it please work? And just say, which we did with the CRL, this is what Auckland needs. We're just going to plug on. And we're just actually going to push on because it's the right thing to do, and you will catch up with us, and the government have. We need to do the same thing for social services. These are the things Auckland needs. We're simply going to push on, and you will catch up with us, because we will point out very strongly where those gaps are, and you will not like Auckland's reaction. So it's not falling into being angry, it's being very clear and advocating absolutely for those communities that are falling behind.
David, could we just have a question or comment from Jane? Yeah, back there. Just whilst the microphone's going to her, can I just say one thing about the Royal Commission? The government implemented much of what the Royal Commission recommended or proposed, but one of the crucial things that was missing there was supposed to be creation of shared decision-making bodies around delivery of social services. And that was obviously far too challenging for the government, because it would have meant giving up too much power and decision-making. So I think, Ian, one of the ways that we could get that more right would be if we could actually finally do that part that the Royal Commission strongly recommended. Jane?
It's great to hear optimism, because we hear so much negative at the moment. But I was a bit surprised when you started with talking about the importance of China and culture and history and so on, and I was waiting for, in the discussion, the role of tangata whenua. And that's kind of been invisible tonight, and I would just really be interested in hearing from you what you see as the relationship and leadership to come from tangata whenua, a unique phenomenon in this city as to how we address these issues, and perhaps even why it's been invisible in the discussion.
I'm happy to.
I'm happy to wrangle part of that. And yes, you're right, and for that I apologise. And sometimes things need to be made more visible, and it's good to be reminded of that, because I think for tangata whenua and acknowledging, I'm not too sure how many Māori are in the room, but maybe not many. So from a council perspective, we have a really interesting challenge. Around the council table we have one person who is part Samoan, part Māori. We have the Independent Māori Statutory Board, with whom there's a robust relationship, and that is kind of a, I think it's an interesting construct that needs to find its own feet. But in saying all of that, the relationship with tangata whenua and the relationship with Māori and the relationship with the treaty and everything we do is just kind of automatically sleeved through what we've been talking about, whether it's water or sustainable planning or city planning. It's kind of there. Is it always mentioned? I don't always know the right words to say to make sure that it's mentioned and acknowledged, but it feels as if it's there at quite a visceral level. Could we do better? Of course we could. Are Māori overrepresented in the question that was asked previously by Dr. Shirley? Absolutely. Who are we talking about when we're talking about the falling behind? Māori. So, you know, just to kind of round that up, it's kind of tragic when the only time Māori are mentioned in discussions like this is the statistics and in a negative sense. Sometimes our heads are so full that we don't always remember to round it out with everything we should say. Sorry, and thank you for reminding.
The journey that Ngāti Whātua has been on since the 1950s, when it was down to a quarter acre of land, which was the cemetery in Akahu Bay, to where they are today, is an extraordinary story, not the least of which is the Kainga housing on Kupe Street, for example, in Oraki, where what they've done in terms of design there, but how they've financed that and all that kind of stuff.
7 generations.
So there's a lot to learn there, but for them, and I know because I have this conversation with them, there's been a lot of relearning there as well, but also learning how to adapt some very important cultural principles to work today. So yes, tangata whenua, but they're on a big journey too about what that means in an extraordinarily interdependent 21st century world where the Anthropocene is closing in on us very fast. But then the next challenge for us in Auckland is that we are now the 4th most immigrant-intensive city in the world. So more than 40% of us here in Auckland were born outside New Zealand. So we are more ethnically diverse than Los Angeles. So the 3 cities ahead of us in that ranking are Toronto, Vancouver, and Brussels. So 2 of those cities do this reasonably well, but Brussels is, of course, a complete failure. So this is about tangata whenua, but it's actually for every ethnicity and faith and culture that is in this city to be part of that tapestry. So absolutely yes to tangata whenua, but we've got to understand what an extraordinarily multicultural country, but particularly Auckland, is today. And so I think we don't talk about it is because many people find that far too challenging to think beyond their own culture. So it's a bit of an interesting thing that people will crowd into the domain for the Lantern Festival, but won't turn up on Bastion Point on Waitangi Day. So those are the sort of simple things we could work on.
Thank you for bringing that up, and it's actually quite shocking that wasn't mentioned earlier in this discussion. A couple of very brief things. First of all, in terms of what makes Auckland unique internationally, I think it is the fact that we have such a large Indigenous population, and we should really use some of those principles to our advantage. And we've mentioned Beijing in this book, using the concept of an ecological civilization. I think some of the principles that our tangata whenua have in terms of their association with the land and the spiritual significance of that is extremely important and weaves into a lot of the issues we've talked about tonight. And from my point of view, it's been really exciting seeing those principles translate in terms of the current municipal challenges with Ngāti Whātua's housing developments, because not only are they turning the fights of the 20th century around land into how do we house our people, but they're doing it in ways that are socially inclusive but also incredibly sustainable as well. And so I think what you've cited is important and should be a real anchor for many of the discussions regarding Auckland and its future.
Can I just make a very quick little tiny point? It's really interesting. I was just sitting reflecting and, thinking about glass half full. A lot of the things we talk about we might not necessarily put in terms around tangata whenua, but te ao Māori is around us. So a lot of what we're talking about, whether it's sustainability, waterways, the way we interact with Papatūānuku, it's almost as if that finally we're starting to absorb so many of the things that Māori expect of us, that I'm not expressing it very well. What am I trying to say? I feel kind of hopeful. We don't always know that that's what we're saying, but the fact is that those messages are getting through. Maybe we just need to acknowledge where they've come from.
Well, it's in the nature of these topics that we could go on all night, but unfortunately I'm conscious that the time is we've run over time, so I'm going to have to bring this to a close and ask everybody to give their thanks to the panellists for their insight and expertise. And in particular to Rob as well, Rod for his new book, and it's a great read. And while I'm on the thanks, I'd like to thank Kieran and Caro for sticking around from Unity Books. They have Rod's book for sale and some of our other BWB texts, and Rod has kindly agreed to stick around to sign copies if that is anyone's want. And I'd also like to just announce that there's an upcoming event which may be of interest to some of you. The economist Anne Pettifor is being invited over by the Policy Observatory. She'll be speaking here on Thursday the 15th of September at 5:30 on Brexit, globalisation and the implications for New Zealand. And finally, thank you all for coming, and thank you for your comments and observations. So, good night.
I need to go home and feed children. Yes. You guys are so awesome.
Thank you very much. That was terrific. Thank you.
Thank you.
Was that what you were expecting? You're very brave, just allowing us to. Yeah, nice to see you.